Hey y'all, it is Nikki. Welcome back to the channel. So this video goes out to my fellow fantasy enthusiasts who love this genre and feel they have a God-given talent or passion for this genre, but sometimes struggle to see the point. I don't often struggle with this because I do really believe in fantasy literature and I kind of always have, but there are times where sometimes I do struggle to see, like, is this the most meaningful genre I could be writing in? It's a bit niche, like not everybody likes it, and all of those factors can kind of get to you after a while, I feel. I had sort of a discouraging experience the other day. I saw an episode of a show. It was a murder mystery that was very much centered around a fantasy author, and it was just overall a very negative depiction of the genre. It really focused a lot on escapism, but in like the most negative sense of the word. And at the end of it, I was like, wow, that was depressing, and that was just like a very narrow view of the entire genre. Now, on the more positive side, last semester, or maybe it was the semester before that, I can't remember, I had to spend a lot of time researching children's fantasy literature for one of my courses, and that was actually very encouraging. I found that there was a lot more positive material being written in academic circles on fantasy literature than negative. And like the Oxford School of Children's Fantasy Literature was started by Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and they obviously really believed in the genre. They believed that it had a lot of like power to shape like ethics and morals in young readers, to uplift. It had a lot of good qualities, and so that's what I kind of have to hold on to sometimes when I see that not everybody has that positive view of the genre. I have to remember that, okay, it's not for everyone, number one, but also number two, there is a whole positive side to the genre that lots of people don't even think about. And thinking about that has reminded me why I feel like it's important for me to continue working on my skills in this genre. And I want to encourage those of you who also love this genre and want to use fantasy writing for good to continue, because it really, really is powerful. And I feel that the fantasy genre can accomplish things and can get across ideas that other genres just can't. And I know I've talked about this before, but I've had a couple experiences recently that have really sort of hammered that home for me. For one, this is like a tiny example, but the other day I was just listening to a Timothy Keller sermon while I was walking my dog, and he was making some point about heaven and actually used the Robin Williams movie Hook to demonstrate his point. And guys, that's like one of my favorite movies of all time. It's probably my favorite in its category, and it's definitely in like my top 3 movies ever. Up there with Rocky VI and National Treasure and Planet of the Apes. So like top 4. Where was I going with that? By using that illustration and that sort of fantastical idea, that fantastical world that I was already familiar with, to demonstrate his point, he drove it home so much more effectively. Because heaven is an otherworldly idea. It's an otherworldly place. I can't imagine what it would be like. So bringing in some fantasy language to help sort of get that point across really made it all the more real and powerful for me. And that has been coming through in a few ways with my current project that I'm working on. You guys have heard me talk about Camaro, who is a very complicated but very fun character to write. He's also deeply flawed, and I'm finding that he has become my avatar in this story, and that I'm kind of learning and growing through his growth and development as a character. And I feel like in a lot of ways, writing this fantasy story helps me to kind of work through some of the spiritual ideas that I'm thinking about, or the spiritual struggles that I'm having. Sometimes it's hard for me to just like sit through and like ponder stuff, but by putting them into this language of story in this fantasy setting, I'm sometimes able to process them better and to see how they reflect on my life. I don't know if you guys have that experience, but that has happened to me so many times, and my goal is that by writing this stuff, I can help someone else to do the same thing, to confront a spiritual idea that they could have read 1,000 times or heard in 1,000 sermons and never really understood, to see it in a new way and be impacted by it in a new way. Story can do that, and I feel like especially when we're talking as Christians or as believers, spiritual stuff is not easy to understand. It's very real, but it can't always be accessed or properly expressed through realism. And that's where I feel the fantasy genre can come in clutch, because fantasy gives us a space and a medium to get across these really powerful ideas without taking away their sort of otherworldly quality or their spiritual or transcendent quality, because you're taking the reader to an otherworldly place where they can interact with these ideas and then come back changed, which is very much like the principle of like Narnia. Like Aslan said to the Pevensey children, they were brought to Narnia so that by knowing him there for a little, they might know him better here in the real world. And I know I've said that before in this channel, but it's a powerful quote, and I feel like it really gets to the heart of what my goal is whenever I sit down to write fantasy and what I want my goal to be. And I I want to encourage you guys who are trying to do the same thing to continue in that work, to remember that this is a powerful genre, even if it's not taken seriously everywhere, or even if it's not everybody's thing, that's fine. But for the people who really need to have these ideas expressed to them in a different way so that they can access them and really experience them for the first time, like, you're doing important work and God could really use your story to impact someone. And I think that's really important to remember. And I also think that it's something kind of special about the fantasy genre. Fantasy genre and fantasy language, when used appropriately and when used properly, can really get us closer to spiritual ideas than just like a contemporary fiction or something, for example. Not that those things can't express spiritual ideas, but there is just something special about the fantasy genre, I feel, that it's just different. If you feel that God has given you a passion for that genre, then don't let anyone convince you that the genre can't be used for his glory, because it absolutely can. I think that was all the things that I wanted to say. This is a passionate topic for me, and I'm sure this is not the last time this comes up. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, do not forget to spend some time in the clouds today.